Yarin Caldwell sat on the edge of the examination table, fingers gingerly pressing the darkening bruise on his upper arm. He winced slightly, then chuckled to himself. "Looks worse than it feels," he muttered, flexing his fingers. Across the room, Dr. Velix's eye stalks quivered like disturbed reeds in a storm. The alien physician hovered in place, his medical sensors flashing red and yellow in alternating pulses. It was the interstellar equivalent of a code blue. "You are hemorrhaging internally," Velix said, voice rising in pitch. "This discoloration, this expanding pigment, it indicates subdermal trauma, possibly necrosis." Yarin raised an eyebrow. "It's just a bruise. I have reviewed your physiology," Velix said, darting forward on his levitation disc. "A rupture beneath the dermis could allow toxins to spread. We must prepare for surgical intervention, or at minimum cryoregenerative stasis." Yarin held up a hand. Whoa. No surgery. No stasis. Just ice. Ice? Ice. Velix's voice hit a higher octave. "You intend to place frozen water on a site of internal damage?" Yarin reached into his pack, pulled out a small instant cool pack, cracked the seal, and slapped it against his arm. A soft hiss escaped. "Yup. We've been doing it for centuries. Helps with swelling and pain." Velix's appendages flared in what Yarin had come to recognize as horror. "You are suppressing the body's inflammatory response with primitive temperature modulation? How have your species survived?" "We figured out the basics," Yarin said, leaning back against the wall. "Sometimes the basics work." "You landed on an unstable crystal shelf during an unsupervised descent," Velix said, pacing now. "You tumbled 78 meters and impacted against jagged terrain." Yarin shrugged. "I've taken worse falls back on Earth. You should be dead." "Well, I'm not. Just bruised." Velix stopped pacing and locked all 6 eyes on Yarin. "Your skeleton may be compromised. We must image it." Yarin sighed and nodded. "Fine. X-ray me." "X-ray?" Velix asked, confused. "Scan. Whatever your version is." The scanner emerged from the ceiling like a quiet predator, its circular aperture rotating slowly. A warm light swept over Yarin's body. "Hold still," Velix said, his voice calmer now. "This will only take a moment." Yarin stayed silent, the cold pack still pressed to his bicep. The scanner beeped several times, then retracted. "No fractures," Velix said slowly. "But extensive bruising." "Like I said," Yarin replied. "That level of trauma would incapacitate a Yellari warrior," Velix said. "Guess it's a good thing I'm not a Yellari." Velix made a high-pitched whirring sound, then turned to a console and began typing rapidly. "I must update your file. Your tissue durability appears to exceed all known projections." Yarin smiled faintly. "You're not the first alien to be surprised. I am a physician of 300 planetary cycles," Velix said. "I have treated the respiratory collapse of a Grintak larva after ingesting supercooled plasma. I once stabilized a Hemari diplomat whose circulatory system runs on liquefied methane. But I have never seen a being treat internal trauma with a sack of frozen water and mild amusement." Yarin stood carefully, tested his balance, and flexed his arm again. "Well, I guess today's your first." But before Velix could answer, the ship's intercom chirped. "Medical Bay, respond. We have a code delta in engineering." Velix's eyes narrowed. "That is a containment breach." Yarin tossed his pack over his shoulder. "Let's go." "You were injured." "Bruised," Yarin corrected. "And I'm not sitting this one out." Velix hesitated, then floated toward the door. "Very well. But if you collapse, I will be the one telling your primitive anatomy, 'I told you so.'" The halls of the ship buzzed with red alert lights. Velix led the way through the central corridor, his pace unusually fast for his species. Yarin kept up, though his arm throbbed more now. The cold pack had helped, but the ache was settling deeper. They reached engineering to find 2 crew members already down. Smoke fumed from a cracked panel. Sparks flared. One of the alien engineers, a Larnak with translucent skin, struggled to lift a fallen beam. Yarin didn't wait. He darted forward, grabbed the edge of the beam, and heaved. "Don't strain," Velix shouted behind him. "I'm not." Yarin grunted, teeth clenched. "But this thing is heavy." Together, he and the Larnak shifted the beam enough to free the trapped crew member. The injured alien coughed weakly, pale and slick with stress fluid. "Velix." Yarin called. The doctor was already beside them, scanning quickly, applying a restorative patch to the alien's chest. Transport him to Med Bay 3, Velix ordered. Do not let his core temperature drop. Yarin staggered back, his breathing a little shallow. He leaned against the wall. Velix turned. You are overexerting. Sit. I'm fine, Yarin said, though his arm now pulsed with heat. You are not. That contusion is spreading. Yarin looked down. The bruise had edged purple and green, a watercolor of trauma. Velix pulled him toward a side bench. You will sit. Now. Yarin complied, too tired to argue. Velix examined the bruise again. I will admit, your treatment has prevented swelling. But your pain receptors must be overwhelmed. They're doing their job, Yarin said wearily, reminding me I'm still alive. You have a dubious definition of medical success. Yarin chuckled, then winced. We make do. Velix applied a salve, his hands surprisingly gentle for a being with 3 fingers per limb. This will reduce the internal bleeding, but I insist you remain under observation for 2 of your Earth days. Yarin nodded. Deal. The next 24 hours passed in a haze of monitoring, scans, and awkward conversations with curious alien nurses who couldn't understand why a bipedal carbon-based lifeform would voluntarily expose itself to danger with such frequency. Do you not fear death? One of them asked. Of course I do, Yarin replied. But I fear not living even more. It wasn't bravado. It was just truth. By the second day, the bruise had begun to fade, the edges turning yellow. Velix seemed both baffled and fascinated. I have cataloged over 600 healing processes, the alien doctor said. But yours is efficient. Crude, but efficient. Yarin stretched his arm slowly. We're good at patching ourselves up. Not so good at avoiding injury in the first place. I have noticed. Yarin turned to the viewport, watching the stars drift by in their endless migration. You ever wonder why we're even out here? Because your species cannot sit still, Velix replied. You are pathologically curious. And reckless. Yarin grinned faintly. You say that like it's a bad thing. Velix tilted his head. It is neither good nor bad. It is simply human. Another alert chirped, this time a low-priority beacon. A minor systems glitch. No emergency this time. Velix stood, retrieved a fresh cold pack, and handed it to Yarin. Apply this if the ache returns. Yarin took it and gave the alien a nod. Thanks, document. Velix hesitated, then said, next time you fall 78 meters, try not to land on your arm. Yarin laughed, the sound echoing gently in the sterile room. I'll do my best. The air inside Med Bay 3 was cool and dry, filtered through 10 layers of sterilization protocols that hummed gently behind the walls. Yarin lay stretched out on a diagnostic recliner. His left arm cradled in a mesh sling Velix had insisted upon. The sling was humming slightly, adjusting compression intervals based on microvascular fluctuations, none of which Yarin had asked for. He exhaled slowly through his nose. Is this really necessary? He asked the ceiling. Velix's upper body rotated 90 degrees from a nearby workstation. You are not wearing the thermal cuff. The sling compensates. I took it off because it made my fingers tingle. That indicates nerve engagement. An intended outcome. I don't want my nerves engaged. I want them relaxed. Velix glided closer, a small vial in one hand. This contains a topical agent designed to suppress overactive neural clusters. It will dull peripheral signal transmission. Or I could just stop moving the arm, Yarin said, eyeing the pale purple liquid. That usually works. Immobility is a strategy one support, Velix replied, though I doubt your compliance. Yarin glanced at the wall clock. It was roughly mid-cycle, though time aboard the ship was a loose concept. The artificial day-night cycle mimicked Earth's, but only for the benefit of the human delegation. Everyone else followed their own rhythms. Velix applied the agent with a soft-tipped applicator, his focused silence broken only by the faint clicking of his internal filters. Yarin winced once, then settled. You know, he said after a pause, on Earth people walk around with broken toes and never even show up to a clinic. Velix didn't look up. That is neither admirable nor intelligent. I'm not saying it's smart. Just common. I am beginning to understand that distinction defines your entire species. Before Yarin could answer, the entry panel slid open with a whisper. A tall, leaf-limbed creature stepped inside, a Xyrelian protocol officer named Tharn, whose presence always carried the scent of citrus and sand. "Human Caldwell," Tharn said, his voice a dry rustle. "You are required in Observation Chamber 9. An incident has occurred." Velix straightened. "He is under medical restriction." Tharn's head tilted. "Then he may observe without engagement." Yarin sat up, carefully swinging his legs over the edge of the recliner. What kind of incident? A diplomatic simulation was interrupted by a human delegate. Unintended consequences ensued. Yarin blinked. What kind of consequences? The Yelvathi contingent believes it was a tactical insult. Yarin stood fully, testing his balance. Was it? The delegate attempted to demonstrate a mnemonic exercise by reciting an Earth poem backward while balancing on one hand. He succeeded. The Yelvathi interpreted this as a challenge ritual. Velix stepped in front of Yarin. "You are not cleared for field activity." "I'm not planning to handstand in front of any reptilians," Yarin said. "Just want to help de-escalate." Velix made a low oscillating sound. "If your arm begins to throb, return here immediately." "It's already throbbing," Yarin said. "I'll manage." Tharn gestured toward the corridor, and they moved in silence until the med bay door closed behind them. Observation Chamber 9 was dimly lit, its central floor ringed with tiered seating. The Yelvathi delegation occupied the lower ring, their elongated torsos hunched slightly forward, arms folded in what Yarin had learned was a neutral stance, though it looked like they were constantly preparing to pounce. The human delegate in question, a junior linguistics officer named Stella Kraus, stood on a raised platform, looking contrite but not particularly worried. Yarin approached her quietly. "What possessed you to do gymnastics in a diplomatic session?" "I was trying to explain cognitive elasticity," she whispered. "They asked how we store contradictory information. I thought a physical metaphor might help." "And the backward poem?" "Jabberwocky." It felt appropriate. Yarin pinched the bridge of his nose. "You recited nonsense poetry upside down in front of a species that measures hierarchy by breath control under duress." "I didn't know that part." Below them, one of the Yelvathi clicked its mandibles and hissed through its gill slits. Tharn stepped forward to translate. "They request formal clarification. Was the act a declaration of intent to engage in dual cognition warfare?" Yarin raised both hands, one carefully. "No declaration." Stella was demonstrating an educational principle. "No hostility. No challenge." The lead Yelvathi leaned forward, its eyes narrowing. They questioned why a species would use such displays during peaceful instruction. "Because sometimes we use absurdity to make a point stick," Yarin said. "It's how we handle complexity." The Yelvathi murmured among themselves. Tharn translated again. "They are unsettled by your comfort with incoherence." "That's fair," Yarin said. "We are too." A long pause. Then the lead Yelvathi nodded once, slowly. "They accept your explanation. But they request that future demonstrations adhere to shared symbolic frameworks." "Understood," Yarin said. "We'll leave the poetry out of it." The chamber lights brightened slightly, a sign of resolution. Stella exhaled. "I thought it was a good metaphor," she muttered. "It was," Yarin said. "Just not for this audience." They exited into the corridor. Tharn peeled away toward the diplomatic wing, and Stella turned to Yarin. "You sure you're okay?" He rotated his arm slightly. "Still attached. Still aching. The sling's new. Upgraded model. It hums." She gave him a sympathetic look before heading off. Yarin turned back toward the med bay. Velix was waiting just inside the doors, arms crossed, a datapad hovering beside him. "I observed the chamber feed. You gestured with your injured limb. Instinct. Instinct is not a medical strategy. Neither is being locked in a room all day." Velix handed him a small capsule. "This will not interact with your blood sugars or electrolyte balance. It will reduce inflammation without inducing drowsiness." Yarin examined it before swallowing it dry. "Thanks. You are scheduled for another scan at next cycle." Yarin nodded. "I'll be here." Velix hesitated. "Your people are difficult to treat. Not because of biology. Because you resist idleness. We're not built for sitting still." "You should be." Recovery demands stillness. Yarin looked at the far wall where a plant floated in zero-G suspension, its roots coiled in nutrient mist. Maybe, but everything we've ever done came from not waiting. Velix didn't answer. Instead, he turned back to his console, the soft tapping of his digits resuming their rhythm. Hours passed. The ship's lighting dimmed to simulate evening. Yarin remained in the med bay, half dozing, listening to the faint sounds of machines breathing around him. The pain in his arm had dulled to a manageable throb, and the bruising had turned a murky yellow-brown, speckled with fading red. Near simulated midnight, a new figure entered, slender, bipedal, with crystalline skin that shimmered faintly under the lights. A Selenari biologist, one of the ship's civilian researchers. "Is the human conscious?" she asked Velix. Yarin opened one eye. "The human is sitting right here." She turned to him unperturbed. "I have a hypothesis about your dermal regeneration. May I examine your arm?" Velix raised one brow ridge. "He is not a specimen." "I'm not offended," Yarin said, "as long as nothing gets poked." She approached, her hands moving with delicate precision. "Your skin exhibits layered microfracture repair not seen in most oxygen-based life forms. Have you been exposed to low-pressure environments recently?" "Only once. That was a bad day." She tapped a small scanner to his forearm. "You produce excess fibrinogen. It's inefficient but undeniably effective. Story of our species." She tilted her head. "You survive by producing more than necessary and hoping some of it sticks." Yarin grinned. "Sounds about right." She thanked him and left without ceremony. Velix watched her go. "She will publish her findings," he said. "You will become a case study." "Not the first time I've been in someone's paper." "Did it help you?" "No. But the cafeteria gave me extra dessert for a week." Velix made a low, uncertain sound. "I do not understand your reward systems." "You're not alone." The lights dimmed further, signaling night shift transition. Yarin leaned back, letting the hum of the sling lull him. Velix moved quietly, adjusting the recliner's angle, then muttered something in his native dialect too soft for the translator to catch. Yarin didn't ask. Sleep came slowly, not because of pain, but because he knew that somewhere else on the ship someone was probably attempting another metaphor. 3 days after the handstand poetry debacle, Yarin finally earned his way out of medbay. Not because he was cleared, exactly, but because he wore Velix down with relentless bargaining, minor bribes, and a thorough explanation of how Earth's health insurance systems worked, which left the alien physician so disturbed he simply waved him out with a muttered, "Try not to fall on anything sharp." The ship's activity corridors were quieter than usual rotation cycle 13, according to the central clock. During this shift, most diplomatic envoys either engaged in private recalibration rituals or mental rest phases. Yarin, meanwhile, had a different objective. He entered the communal recreation chamber that doubled as a gymnasium, library, and, bizarrely, an aquarium. The ship's designers, a committee of species with wildly incompatible leisure preferences, had compromised by layering all functions into a single, adaptable space. Currently, the room was set to moderate kinetic engagement, which meant most of the soft furniture had retracted and the floor was firm underfoot. A few aliens milled about too fleemy in the far corner, playing an anti-gravity board game that appeared to involve flicking electromagnetic stones at each other's eyes, and a lone Kyrian who was rhythmically striking a padded post with its forehead. Yarin ignored them and made his way to the resistance harnesses. He'd just begun adjusting the tension settings when Velix glided through the open threshold, his posture unusually rigid. "You said you were returning to your quarters." "I changed my mind." Yarin tightened the strap across his chest. "I need to rebuild shoulder mobility. Low weight, high rep, I'll go easy. You cannot simply self-prescribe rehabilitation. I've done it before." "That is neither comforting nor persuasive." Yarin hooked his arm through the loop and pulled slowly. The strain was minimal, but it lit up the dull ache in his shoulder like a warning beacon. "See," he said through gritted teeth. "Controlled motion. No inflammation. No tearing." Velix hovered closer, scanning without permission. "Your joint capsule is resisting. Cartilage fluid density is insufficient. You are risking micro-fissures along the glenoid." Yarin paused the motion. "You're saying I need hydration. I am saying you need to stop. I haven't moved in days. I'll seize up." "You are not a combustion engine." "Worse," Yarin said, releasing the strap. "I'm a bored human." Velix made a frustrated clicking sound, then floated toward a nearby console. He tapped into the ship's database and summoned a diagnostic overlay that projected Yarin's musculoskeletal structure in translucent red. Sections of the shoulder joint glowed amber. "You are healing," Velix said. "But slowly. Your body prioritizes clotting over tissue regeneration. It's inefficient. Tell that to evolution." "I would if it answered messages." Yarin sat down on a low bench. "You didn't come all the way down here just to scold me. What's going on?" Velix hesitated, then activated a privacy field around them. The hum of the recreation room faded into silence. "There was a transmission this morning. From Earth." Yarin leaned back. "Bad news." "Not precisely. But it was. Illuminating. Your species has submitted a formal request to share trauma management protocols." Yarin blinked. "Wait. Earth wants to teach aliens how to..." "What?" "Rub dirt in it and walk it off." They included a document titled The Psychological Benefits of Adversity. It contains multiple references to something called grit. "Oh no." They argue that resilience is best developed through exposure to unpredictable hardship and minimal external support. "That's not a protocol. That's a coping mechanism." Velix deactivated the privacy field. "Several delegations are alarmed." The Grenthary ambassador interpreted the document as a threat. Because he believes Earth intends to destabilize diplomatic relations by encouraging psychological deterioration. Yarin stood up, wincing slightly. "I need to talk to someone. That document was never meant for off-planet use." Velix followed him down the corridor. "You will limit your pace to 3 kilometers per hour. I'm walking normally. You are limping." "That's just my regular gait." They arrived at the communications deck where a human technician, Julian Mercado, was hunched over a console, chewing on what appeared to be a stress straw. He looked up as they approached. "Caldwell, you seen the feedback on the last data packet? I'm here because of it." Julian spun the screen. The Selenari flagged it as potential cultural contamination. The Tor then asked if grit was a mineral. "And the Yelvathi think it's a form of punishment training. Why did it get sent?" Julian shrugged. "Command wanted to highlight Earth's adaptability models. Somebody on the policy team thought it'd be inspiring." Yarin rubbed his temple. "Did they include the part about kids being told to walk it off after breaking an ankle?" "Yes. They called it character development." Velix's eye stalks narrowed. "Your planet promotes bone fractures as growth opportunities?" "No," Yarin said. "We just have a long history of pretending pain doesn't exist if we don't look directly at it. This is deeply illogical. Tell me something new." Julian started typing. "I can flag the packet for retraction. But it's already been auto-synced to the shared diplomatic archive." "Of course it has," Yarin muttered. "I recommend a clarification statement," Velix said. "Something that contextualizes your species' psychological dysfunctions. We call it resilience. Words matter less when the behaviors remain." Julian looked up. "You want me to draft something?" "I'll do it," Yarin said. "It needs to come from someone who actually understands what we meant." Back in his quarters, Yarin sat at the console, the lights dimmed low to help him focus. One arm in the sling, the other typing slowly. His message was short, to the point, and most importantly honest. He explained that Earth's ideas about hardship were born from necessity, not design. That resilience wasn't about glorifying suffering, but about finding ways to keep going when no one else could help. That yes, humans often responded to pain with humor, and yes, sometimes they did things that looked absurd to others. But it wasn't mockery. It was survival. He attached 3 case studies. A climber who amputated his own arm to escape a canyon. A child who learned to walk again after a spinal injury. And a nurse who stayed inside a viral quarantine zone for 9 weeks to care for strangers. No spectacle. Just quiet, relentless will. He ended the message with a line he remembered from a field medic back on Earth. "We don't bounce back. We build forward." He sent the message. 2 days later, the response came back. The Grenthary ambassador issued a retraction of his previous alarm. The Yelvathi requested a copy of the nurse's case study. And the Tor then? They sent a mineral sample labeled grit honorary. Velix read the responses with a neutral expression. "It seems your explanation was accepted. I think they just needed to hear that we weren't proud of the pain. Just proud of surviving it." Velix turned to him. "Your arm is healing. You may remove the sling in 40 hours. Yarin nodded. 40 hours. "No sooner. I will know if you cheat. I'm aware." They stood in quiet for a moment, the hum of the ship soft around them. "Doctor," Yarin said, "thanks for not giving up on trying to understand us." I do not require gratitude. Still, Velix blinked slowly. You are the most frustrating patient I have ever treated. Then I've done my job. Velix left without a reply. Yarin sat back, resting his arm against the side of the chair. The once angry Bruise now a faded memory. No more falling. No more poetry. No more metaphorical grit. Just one human doing his best not to need another ice pack.